let me start with a question. Who are you? I mean, really, suppose I ask you personally, what will you respond? I'm a lawyer, I'm a psychologist, perhaps I'm a mom or I'm a student. Oftentimes, that's how we define us in Western culture. In Africa, they'd respond, I'm from the tribe of Afar or Amhara. And by the way, Walisans are pretty similar to Africans. I can't remember how many times I get asked, "De la fille à qui? Whose daughter are you?" We also think in some sort of tribal terms. And while it's partially true that our inheritance, our relationships, and our profession defines us, it's not what I'm looking for today. I want to go deeper, to the core of you and me. I'm going to talk about identity and freedom. You need to be free from twisted mindsets and defining circumstances in order to become the best version of yourself. I got a second chance to find freedom by releasing my true identity. Perhaps this is one for you too. So who am I? In a typical introduction, I'd say something like this. I'm a TV producer and host, primarily at Canal 9, where I've been given the privilege to run my own show, which is called Bijoux. And the Bijoux is a miracle in itself. I've started with nothing but a vision, and then a blueprint. And this was my only physical object in order to acquire a huge amount of money by several sponsors in the middle of summer break, and it's less than 7 weeks as a basic financial security in order to start production. I didn't have a video, no financial experience, nothing but a burning desire to produce a show where we go beneath the usual TV talk to the heart of human being. And it worked well. And I want to say thank you to Canal 9 for this opportunity. It worked, and I love it because people are in the center. People are my passion. And therefore, next to TV, I'm working as a life and business coach. I love to travel and surf the ocean. So is this who I am? I think it reveals a whole lot about my personality, about my talents, and about my skills. But let's suppose I'm losing my job in TV. All of a sudden, I detect that I'm suffering from a life-threatening, bizarre sickness. I can't do sports anymore, neither work as a coach. Instead, lying in hospital at the edge of life itself. What would I tell you then? The truth is, I've been there. Thankfully, it didn't occur all at the same time, but I've been going through these experiences. And I'm sure many of you too, you've been going through some tough seasons, and they are not fun. But they're essential. If you allow it, they strip away from you many shallow layers of so-called identity. The process of releasing your true identity isn't accomplished, though, after one of those seasons. It's a lifelong journey. And tonight, I want to share some revelations I've been entrusted with along this path up until now. And I'd like to hand you some tools. Tools to set you free from twisted mindsets and defining circumstances so you can receive those revelations. And those tools I've been discovering and applying in my personal life, and after great results, I've been testing them in the life of others, daily, at work. As I've mentioned, people are in the center of my career. So those tools have been confirmed by numerous people I interviewed as a journalist, as well as been approved by many individuals I've been supporting as a life coach. I could tell you story after story, but I've decided tonight I'd like to illustrate those tools upon my personal life experience. The first tool I'm handing you is a key to release this revelation. You've started with a yes. If you're going to take anything out of this talk, get this certainty. You can forget everything else, but keep this one. You've started with a yes. Someone or something else above your power said yes to you. You are a consequence of this powerful act. Perhaps the most ideal scenario is you mom and dad being crazy in love. They forget everything around them. They're so in love, they become one in body, soul, and spirit. And by this unifying act we call sex, you are created. What an amazing, perfect start of you. Your roots are love to its core. But maybe you're not as lucky having such a perfect start. Maybe you're a so-called accident. Your mom or dad didn't plan you. Let me tell you what, it doesn't matter. There is still a big yes behind you. There is something outside your power, something that existed before you came into being. If it wasn't your mom or dad, it might have been God. If it wasn't God, it was nature itself. Maybe it was a single sperm which wanted to survive, to connect, to create life. It was a yes outside your power, something that is bigger than you. And let me add something here. This yes wasn't there because you were accomplishing something. This yes is unconditional. In the core of your being, you're designed for unconditional love. And life itself has given us this backup long before our brain was so highly developed to argue the opposite. And if you want this certainty planted in the core of your being, you need a key, a particular one. It's the key of receiving. There is nothing you can do but receive this unconditional yes. The chains, mindsets, and attitudes which are withholding you from this yes are called striving, earning, performing, but also ignorance and pride. The only way to free yourself is to get a childlike attitude and receive this unconditional yes. Acknowledge it and say thank you. It is then when you start to taste freedom. Freedom from constantly seeking validation and approval by other people. Who among you knows that all of us want to be loved and accepted? We need each other. We're designed to connect. But unfortunately, unhealthy patterns and twisted mindsets have created a society where we have become slaves of each other. Or precisely speaking, slaves of expectations. You can be enslaved to your own expectations, those you think others might have. Oftentimes, it's just a false presumption. You know, when I was preparing this speech, I thought you want to give me this scientific, wonderful speech, and it just didn't work. It didn't work. I was having an expectation on myself I thought you probably never had. But you can also be enslaved to expectations others truly do have. Either way, we are like puppets hanging on strings attached to expectations. And whatever others say or think of us influences how we move. Some of us more, some of us less, but all of us do. And don't underestimate the power of this pattern. It's deep. Why? Because we are born into a system where acceptance is based on a condition. I assume when you were a baby, like, people were all nice to you and loving. It didn't matter whether you would cry like you'd die any moment or smile like the cutest thing on earth. People were just being nice. It happened to me. But then it changed. The older I got, the more I learned that my behavior was influencing people's approval. Teachers were liking me based on my grades, boys on my look, and friends on my outgoing personality and fun birthday parties. This pattern is deep, and as I've said, we need each other. But there is a difference between operating as a slave or govern as a free human being. And if you know deep down your heart that there is a big unconditional yes, you don't need to squeeze this desperately out of other people. In contrary, if you know that, you can easily cut some strings of expectations. Your own, those you think others might have, or those others truly do have. You're ready to handle the next tool, the scissor of bravery. Cutting strings requires courage. You're brave moving that direction because you don't know the outcome. Let me exhibit this device by another example of my personal life. As a young adult, I was hearing a lot, "You're always in a good mood. You're always happy. It's so fun to be around you." While in reality, I wasn't feeling happy all the time. I was having some bad days too. But somehow, unconsciously, I've picked up that I'm loved because I'm always happy. Conditional love. And this was just influencing my life over and over again. Probably that wasn't the case, a typical false presumption, but it was my interpretation of their words. Hence, I never told anyone that I was having a bad day or painful heartache. And by acting so, I was cutting off parts of myself. I was rejecting pain. And this inward behavior was manifesting itself in a physical condition called anorexia. Thankfully, only for a short period of time, but I've basically stopped eating. And this was a physical manifestation of my inner rejection towards myself, being in a bad mood, having a poor day, being a mess. And the only way out of this was freeing myself from a string called "you're loved because you're always happy." Conditional love. And here it comes, the scissor of bravery. And as I've said, cutting strings requires courage. But who of you knows that amazing quote, once you become fearless, life becomes limitless. So I had to be brave and practice the exact thing I was most afraid of, and actually started practicing being in a bad mood. And surprisingly, I stopped putting on the mask of glorious happiness on days where I felt sad or discouraged, and surprisingly, people love me anyway. And they do. You can try it. And most important, one of these people is myself. If you want to free yourself from strings of expectations, you need to do the exact thing you're most afraid of. Maybe you're afraid of saying no. You're feeling enslaved to other people because you're having difficulties to say no. Be brave. Say no. You'll figure people like you anyway, and if not, their affection isn't real. They're not worth it, period. What we truly need are the yeses of people who are able to handle our no's. That's what we need. We need connection. We can't walk alone, but unconditional one. And this leads me to my last revelation. Circumstance don't define your value. The Bijoux, such a powerful symbol for you and me, is the last tool I'm handing you. 4 years ago, I was unemployed. Never, ever in my whole life I imagined this could happen to me. You know, things worked mostly pretty well in my career. Even in school, my grades were usually A's. Later on, I got accepted into acting school, first casting. I slipped very easily into journalism. But this situation was different. It was quite a shock. And in addition, pretty much all of my close and dear friends were getting married and moved out of town. I was alone and didn't have a job. I felt very incomplete, ashamed, and lonely. I was absolutely devastated. And I remember so clearly the low point. After 3 months not finding a job, I got recruited into a working program by the unemployment office. It was a program mostly for people who are not very motivated. So me being there, I was very underexerted, I was bored and felt so misplaced. This situation absolutely questioned my identity. And it was at that time that I've been receiving a precious tool. A tool to remember a fundamental truth. It was handed to me by a former coworker I randomly met for coffee one day. I told him I was just being real, and I told him, you know, I really, really feel ashamed not to have a job and being stuck in that program. He was listening, looked at me and said, "You're a jewel, and no circumstance will ever change your value." And this one sentence shifted everything. It was reminding me of my true value. A bijou, a jewel, is such a powerful symbol of your worth. Who of you knows that whether this jewel is all shiny presented in a jewelry store or hidden in a dark garage, its value doesn't change. If its worth is at 10,000 Swiss francs in the jewelry store, it's not going to reverse if you hide it in your dirty, dark garage. Circumstance don't define your value. Your worth stays the same. And did you also know that in order for an uncut, rough gemstone to become the shiny bijou, a craftsman has to cut away a minimum of 50%. Last winter, I visited Sri Lanka, the island of jewels. I've watched those craftsmen as they've been polishing and grinding those gemstones. It's a fact that half of a gem is cut away in order to shine at its best. I think in difficult seasons, it helps us to remember that we only become the most splendid and magnificent version of ourselves once we surrender to the cutting process. And today, I can say with all of my heart that I love my job. It's so crucial. And I'm so grateful for my friends. And Sandy, thank you, you're here. You mean a lot to me. But I'm not rooted there. It may all fade away. And there is still a big, big unconditional yes behind me. The key of receiving made it possible that this certainty is rooted in my heart. But there are times I'm forgetting about this unconditional love. Just somehow it slipped into the background. And unconsciously, I'm trying to get this affirmation out of other people or myself, and I'm strict again. But by now, I've got another tool, the scissor of bravery. I can free myself by practicing the exact thing I'm most afraid of. And you'll remain free in all seasons if you keep the Bijoux in your pocket. Circumstance don't define your value. Your worth stays the same. You're a miracle. Act like one.